You're listening to Scaling Up Services, where we speak with entrepreneurs, authors, business experts, and thought leaders to give you the knowledge and insights you need to scale your service-based business faster and easier. And now, here is your host, business coach Bruce Eckfeldt.
Are you a CEO looking to scale your company faster and easier? Check out Thrive Roundtable. Thrive combines a moderated peer group mastermind, expert one-on-one coaching, access to proven growth tools, and a 24/7 support community. Created by Inc. award-winning CEO and certified scaling-up business coach Bruce Eckfeldt, Thrive will help you grow your business more quickly and with less drama. For details on the program, visit eckfeldt.com/thrive. That's ECKFELDT.com/thrive.
Welcome, everyone. This is Scaling Up Services. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm your host. And our guest today is Sam Schutte. He is CEO of Unstoppable Software. We're going to talk to him a little bit about his own experience building and scaling a service-based company in the technology space. We're going to talk to him about the companies he works with, helping them figure out how to leverage technology to grow and scale their businesses. It's going to be a fun conversation. I think, as most people on the podcast know, I ran a technology company for many years, so we're probably going to geek out a little bit on agile and agile software services, but I'm excited for this. I think technology is such a huge play in every business, particularly services. I don't think service companies leverage technology enough, and that gives a lot of great opportunities. So I'm excited to talk to Sam about this. So with that, Sam, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bruce.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about your background, how you got into this. In our conversation here, you were mentioning that you have both computer science and business background. Tell us a little bit about how you got into that, how you got into software, and how you started Unstoppable.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of funny. Growing up, I was always into just sort of hacking and building computers, and that was the sort of the BBS dial-up era. And that's sort of when I got into technology, but I never really did any programming at all until college. And I think I always thought I would be more of like a network guy or a server person or something. But I went to University of Pittsburgh and took some programming classes and kind of decided to dive into that. So I got my computer science degree from there and got out, started working for, I had really good luck that my first job was with a publicly traded medical record software company, So it wasn't just consulting in an IT shop somewhere. I was building products, which was awesome. Worked in a lot of startups. I've worked in IT departments, over the next, if you fast forward the next 10 years or whatever. Mm-hmm. Went back to school in around 2008 to get my MBA, which was really interesting to sort of, I already had my own company at that point. I started the business, went to night school, put my house on the market, and my wife got pregnant, like all within a 3-month period, right?
Funny how that happened.
Not in that order, but, and I think my wife is like, yeah, you're going to start a business. That sounds like a great idea to do right now, But it just worked out well. And so kind of going through that whole MBA process at Xavier University in Cincinnati, it was really interesting to kind of put that right side by side with technology. And so, so that was kind of my path. And so the business was, like I said, started January of 2008. So it's been over 12 years now and been running well.
Yeah. And I guess as a leader, going from someone who's, writing code or at least, more on the delivery side, how have you kind of had to evolve yourself as you've, grown the company and kind of focused more on the CEO role over time? Yeah,
that's a good question. It's crazy. I always say, my job is so different than I ever thought it would be because, like you said, even in 2008 when I started the business, I was just a solo practitioner writing code for hire, right? Yep. And of course, over time, I've had to evolve into I think there's a couple key things that you just never thought you would have to do as a developer, like negotiate contracts with a room full of lawyers, right? Yeah. From a Fortune 500 company. Obviously the whole sales side, when I first started having to do sales activities when I wanted to grow the company beyond just myself, I would get on the phone I remember I had a phone call with a big insurance company and I just froze. I didn't know. It's I don't know. Because all I could rattle off was technology tools and Microsoft, Java, blah, blah, whatever. That's not how you do it, right? And so I did a lot of sales training. I did the Sandler sales training system for about 5-6 years. I did it a long time, and then also brushed up I did various marketing training and I worked with a couple of marketing coaches. So that was a big change and still was a significant portion of what I do. Just all that content and sales and strategy and legal and financial that, I haven't written any code myself very often anymore, because you just don't have time. But So that's been a big evolution.
Yeah, I always say if I'm writing code at this point, something's gone horribly, horribly wrong.
Yeah. I occasionally will do something just to like prove I still got it, but but my developers just laugh at me because it's like pathetic.
So tell me, as you've kind of grown the business, or if you've kind of looked at how your business has evolved, what are some of the key kind of strategy decisions you need to make around your customers, the markets you serve, how you've organized yourselves, your products and services? I mean, what are some key things that you've kind of done over the years that have either worked well or not so well when it comes to growing your own service company?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, a couple of things come to mind. One, and you hear a lot of people talking about this, is focus and specialization, right? I think when you kind of start out any service companies, especially agencies, you just think, well, we do technology, and that's kind of it, and whoever wants us to. And while that's sort of true, and while what you do in your day-to-day isn't necessarily what you want to put out into the universe as trying to attract people, right? Because it's too generic. And so we, over time, sort of intentionally and sort of accidentally too, started specializing in manufacturing and healthcare as two big industries we work with, probably about like 70% of our business. Mm-hmm. And I say accidentally because it just so happened that like some of our first companies our first customers were in those spaces. But then once you sort of have two or three of them, you think, okay, now I sort of understand, something about manufacturing. I can start creating content and messaging and outreach and speak to these folks, very specifically. So that's been a big deal because it just, in a number of cases, it makes us much more appealing and interesting. And I still know a lot of companies that are much bigger than mine that don't do that. Mm-hmm. And they're always just sort of scattershot, large messaging marketing, efforts to everyone. So that's been a big deal. And then I think also as time has gone on, figuring out like, how do you really design a product offering that you're going to sell to these customers that fits them and also helps you, sort of grow your business sustainably, right?
Yeah.
And we've done a number of things around that we can dive into more, but it's all about sort of designing the right packages and the right sort of bundles of your services, I think.
Yeah, I have a phrase that I use a lot with my clients is that the faster you want to scale, the more you need to focus, right? The more specific you need to be, the more zeroed in on very particular segment, a very particular problem, a very particular solution to that. Because that's the only way you're really going to create effective marketing and sales channels, the way you're going to really hone your team to be able to deliver against that repeatedly. So yeah, I'm a big fan of getting super specific on your strategic focus. And I love the idea of packaging. I mean, I think service companies look more like product companies I find do well. So the way that they can kind of productize or package their services in ways that, because honestly, no one wants to buy hours, right? No one wants to just say, all right, well, yeah, I'm going to pay you an hourly rate to just do stuff, right? They want solutions, right? And the only way they can sort of see a solution is to understand like what you do as a thing that's going to solve this problem, not how many hours you're going to spend or what your billable rate is or how many people you're going to put on my project. Like I just want problem solved. So talk to me about how you've kind of packaged things, bundled things up in different ways, and I guess how you've applied them to different customer needs and why it's worked for you and what you've learned about that process.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I guess, so first off, on the note of hours, I mean, I think a key thing when you're designing any kind of these packages is to ask yourself, who am I competing against, right? Like, what is my actual competition? Because, if let's say you're an hourly software development company, you're going to bill, per hour to write code. So you think like, well, my competition is other consulting companies, other agencies. Yes. But that's your primary competition, right? You have secondary competition, tertiary competition. And most of the time, if you're billing per hour and you're just staffing, then your competition is just, well, what does it cost versus me just hiring somebody, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of a weak solution because there's a lot of great employees out there. You can hire great people, and it puts you in this weird spot sometimes of saying, like, you don't want to have to tell your customers, yeah, but what if you're not really a good manager? What if you're not good at hiring? Because then you're just insulting them, right? It's not a great value sort of equation. And so I think like for an example, so we've done quite a few recently of these sort of we would call like maintenance plans or maintenance packages, right? And with those, we may say, so the retainer-based packages, so a monthly flat fee, and we'll say, all right, basically we'll fix anything that breaks, and then we'll also do a certain volume of effort around extending, enhancing, and adding onto your system, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's an interesting example because we have one we are hoping to close here real soon. I mean, it's about a $200,000 contract. And this particular company, I mean, they just furloughed a bunch of staff, as a lot of companies are out there right now with all this COVID-19 business.
Yep.
They've been told they're not allowed to hire consultants. Okay. But they're going to sign our deal. Well, why? Because ours is more of an insurance policy, right? If we put this in place, anything that breaks, they'll just fix.
Oh, interesting. Well, it's a fixed cost. I mean, they're just seeing it as a line item.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a fixed monthly fee. Now, we put limits on it. We're not going to come in and work 600 hours a month to fix whatever that is, right? But it's fuzzier, so it's much harder for them to, because you want to get away from the sort of simple math equation of, oh, your time is worth, $150 an hour or whatever it is, and that's too expensive, not expensive enough. I mean, you really can't win, because if I say $150 an hour, if you have listeners in California, they think, wow, those guys are cheap.
Yeah.
But your listeners in Iowa think, wow, those guys are expensive. And what do they judge me? How do they judge our services based on that, right? Maybe we're no good. Maybe we're too good, right? Yeah. Maybe we're not. I mean, I've heard it. I'm sure you have too, heard it all the way. Well, we don't need guys that are that expensive. You're probably we need a weaker, a more junior developer, right?
Exactly.
So I think tying it to what is the value in that case? It's an insurance policy. And I say that, I'm like, look, this is just an insurance policy. If anything breaks, we're there. Mm-hmm. And there's other stuff like we start every project with a discovery engagement. So we don't do any proposal work. We don't do any design work, nothing for free, right?
Yeah.
And the solution there is or what we're selling there is look, you want to take steps forward on your project, but you don't know what you need, what you want, what it's going to take. You're going out and you're getting quotes from people. And often, most of my competitors will just say, well, we're $150 an hour. And I don't know, maybe it'll take a month or two. I don't know. That's not what's the value there? So if we say, look, it's whatever, a few $1,000s to really work with us and come up with a design, an architecture, and a plan. Well, now you have a plan. Isn't that worth something? Isn't that worth X amount of money? Mm-hmm. And we probably have gotten to the point where, maybe 20% of our revenue is just those planning engagements, essentially.
Yeah.
Whereas 6 years ago, that was all free. We'd just do it for free because that's what you did, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of like looking at every interaction you have with the customer and figuring out where you're delivering value and then figuring out how to productize it. And maybe also more importantly, when are they ready to buy something? I always tell my customers, if I come to you and I say, look, I'm a total stranger, but here's a contract for $500,000, you should sign it. They're not going to do that. Mm-hmm. I'm a total stranger. They have no trust and nothing. Because
there's no basis for.
Yeah. But if I say, why don't we work together for a month and it's whatever, 15, 20,000, whatever the number is. And at the end of this, you're going to get this, and you can cancel any time and it's guaranteed. And there's all these other, then they're ready to buy that. They're ready at that point in our relationship to give it a shot, maybe.
Yeah.
Because I think, these folks that go out and just proposing out 6-figure contracts and they win 1 out of 10 of them, through RFPs or whatever, right? They're just kind of wasting a lot of time.
Well, they're taking a lot of risks too. I mean, I think that you talk about you're not sure if the client is really ready. They don't know you that well. The flip side is true too. You don't know them that well.
Sure.
There's always sometimes the worst outcome is winning the bid.
Yeah. Oh, that's absolutely true. Yeah.
And not really realizing that any kind of service relationship is going to have some kind of relationship component to it that goes both ways, and you need to make sure it's a good match. And there's sometimes people take on clients that are not good clients for them, right? And it's it's not good for the business.
Well, and I think as a leader, I've been thinking about this recently because sometimes the more success you have as a leader of an organization, you get that confidence, and then you start to sort of get aggressive and hopefully you're hungry, right? And you want to win, right? And so you get a customer and it's like, oh, I sent them this proposal and they like it and they want to do it, and you just kind of get all caught up in just we're going to make this sale, we're going to do this business. But like you said, maybe you should step back and say, should we?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, hang on. Is this a fit for us? And I had a customer a little while ago. He was a he was a prospect, high net worth individual, wanted to found a startup, build some software. We had a personal connection, so the trust was already there. It was an introduction from a close friend of both of ours. But he wanted to build software that was sort of for, I guess I would say, the music industry.
Okay.
And I'm like, he's got the money because I know he's a high net worth individual. It's not going to be a hard sale because the guy already said you need to hire Sam, our friend. But what's the referenceability there? How does it tie into our plan? How much of my brain space is it going to take up? Because it does. Every project takes up some of your brain to do this in an industry that I don't really see as a future for our company, of music related software. As much fun as it might be to do some music thing. And so I turned them down. I said, I think it's just not a fit for us, which was hard because it would have been a lot of revenue. And so, I think you got to check yourself a little bit and not let your ego and your passion and your drive necessarily make you, like you said, lose by winning.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is you have to have a defined strategy. I mean, if you haven't done the work to figure out who really is my best customer, what is the problem I'm really going to solve for them, what are the differentiators that I'm going to sell against relative to my competition, like if you haven't done that work and define that very clearly for yourself, it's really hard because otherwise you're just kind of going on gut and you're thinking, this doesn't feel super right, but I don't have a good set of criteria in place to be able to make the decision, and you don't have a clear sense of what you do want. So it ends up becoming just like, it doesn't feel quite right, as opposed to, hey, this doesn't fit our strategic profile.
Well, and I think the other thing is that I struggled with for a long time as a service, technology services business is, okay, I want to specialize and I want to have that sort of strategy and that focus, right? And so that means whatever I'm selling or offering has to be like so incredibly ultra focused and dead on that they hear it and they just think, wow, that is us to a T, right? But that's really, really hard, And what I have found works better is to just be like in your messaging and when you talk to customers, like you don't have to be dead on, but it can be, maybe 30% there that you're at least saying, we specialize in manufacturers. We do a lot of stuff with like production workflows and batch control and stuff like that. And they think, oh, yeah, we have batches, we have jobs, And so it's almost like keep it simple, stupid, right? And I mean, I banged my head against the table for probably 5 years trying to come up with like what it is, like how to describe exactly what we did for one specific niche. And then you get too narrow and there's not enough people in that niche. And then you describe it to some other customer and they think, that doesn't sound like us at all, because it's too specific, right? So it's an interesting balance to be appealing and to sort of register in a customer's head, but not be talking about something they don't understand.
Yeah, I agree. There is a kind of a size to the target that becomes optimal where it's tight enough where people can say, oh, like I understand what you do. The other one I always say is you want to be referable, right? If you do anything for anyone, like how do I refer you? But it's like, oh, okay, I get it. You work with manufacturers on, flow control systems. Like, oh, okay, like I can think of some manufacturers and I can think of some people that deal with flow control. I now have an ability to connect you with the people in my world. Let me ask the other kind of part of, I think, the business for service companies that always comes up, which is, the one side we have customers. How do I position myself? What are my channels? How do I sell? How do I package my products and services? But I always say services is really a double-sided market, right? You've got customers, but then you have employees. You've got to go find talent. Talk to me a little bit about your strategy on the talent side. I mean, I was in the tech space for a long time. Finding good software developers was hard. The demand for software development was, has grown tremendously in the last 15, 20 years. The competition for software talent is very, very high. How have you gone about figuring out who really fits your company from a culture point of view, from a skill point of view, and then how have you gone out and attracted the right people, and how do you engage them, build a culture around the company?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, I think from a skill and sort of persona sort of view, I mean, what we have defined and what we target is, senior, high-end, experienced developers, so you're talking about 12 plus years experience, something like that, maybe 15 years experience. Mm-hmm. And, that need to be fairly self-motivated, can learn quickly, have worked in a variety of different platforms. So you're not getting somebody that only knows Java and you try to put them on something else and he struggles, right? My philosophy, having been a software developer myself is truly strong developers. It doesn't really matter what they're working in. You could say, hey, go write this COBOL program. And they'll say, well, I've never done COBOL. And you'll say, figure it out. And if they're a really strong, analytical, intellectual person, they'll figure it out. And they'll probably be better than a lot of COBOL developers out there, right? Yeah. For instance. So that's kind of like the persona. And granted, that's just what we put out there. And it's hard to there's a lot of stuff that goes into finding and filtering and figuring out if a person is that. Right, which is a whole other story. Yeah. But I think in terms of attracting those people to us, it's like, okay, so you have to design a company for that persona, right? It's just marketing on, like you said, to the other side. Mm-hmm. So if I'm a senior, high-end, super smart developer, I don't have time for any, messing around, right? I don't want to work for somebody whose place is going to be political or, egomaniacal or something or
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
All the things that you see in so many companies. And I also, I don't want to do things like I don't want to have to commute every day. I don't want to have to wear a tie every day. That's for sure, right? And of course, pay is important and everything else. And so really, for instance, in our case, from the beginning, we've always been a remote workforce, which is very helpful nowadays with all the, quarantines and shutdowns. So we've been a remote company since 2008.
Yeah.
And what that has also meant is that we have to get a lot of tools in place to make that work. And we have a whole suite of systems we use, and we've kind of perfected to make that work. And I think the other thing then why, recruiting has not necessarily been a huge pain for us is because we're remote, I can recruit from, say, 3 or 4 zip codes, right? And I have found that, my competitors who are all like, some of the companies out there think what they need to do is have a really fancy, cool, sexy office.
Big
that
tables. And,
Exactly. They do that whole, it's almost trope, right?
Yeah.
And they'll have, Procter & Gamble or somebody come in Cincinnati here, come in and say, oh, wow, look at that. They've got a boa constrictor, right? like that's always my, because that's a real thing. Like,
oh, yeah.
And they think, wow, those guys are so creative. I guess they'll make really good software, But then your problem is you're recruiting in Cincinnati, which is a, mid-market, smaller market, right? And when I put out a job posting, for instance, I might get 2 job applications from Cincinnati and then like 50 from everywhere else, right? And that allows me to have this much wider pool of talent to source. So if I can hire, like at one point I had 2 guys in Idaho working for me. I don't know why. I didn't know why, but I found out that a lot of folks from Silicon Valley and California were sort of fleeing to Idaho because it's beautiful and it's cheap, right?
Is, yeah.
So, by doing that and then with the right tools and management methods in place and sort of approach, we're able to have, high performance distributed teams, and I'm able to recruit from a wide pool of talent. So I'm not trying to build this. Because, if I wanted to build, say, 500 developers in Cincinnati, that's all of them.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen, right?
92% of the market. Yeah.
Yeah, of the ones I'm looking for. And so that's kind of been my strategy. And it's nice because I do see that a lot of service companies that are my competitors, it seems like they spend more time recruiting than they do selling to customers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they are trying to build this like on-premise environment.
Yep. Yeah, no, it is a hard, the talent side can be sometimes harder than the client side. I do find certain service companies, it's that the challenge is actually, or the gating factor of growth, the gating factor of scaling the company is actually on the other side, not the marketing and sales. So you've been a distributed virtual team, since inception. What are some of the things that you've done that have really kind of created a company or created a sense of company while still being distributed, whether it's the tools you use, practices, habits, meeting rhythms? How do you create kind of connective tissue between folks working in a distributed manner?
Sure. Yeah. And so, there's the obvious ones, the Google Hangouts that we all pretty much are available anytime to reply. People or, Slack and stuff like that. And, we used GoToMeeting for a long time, and now we use Zoom, and those things certainly obviously make the sort of distance smaller. But I think there's also stuff like we use a timesheet and time tracking system called Harvest that I've had them for probably 10 years. Probably was one of their first customers, I bet. Yeah. They're a SaaS-based product. And with that, everybody can see what everybody's working on as far as tasks at any given time, right? And we kind of created this concept of asynchronous management or asynchronous something, like that, asynchronous project management, which is basically like, if I can just pop in and look at my report and see everything that everybody's working on, then I don't have to call anyone. I don't have to have a meeting. I don't have to waste time. And so, I think what some companies do is they think, well, since we have this remote force, we need to have more meetings. We need to have a daily 9 a.m. stand-up for 2 hours, right? Well, now there's like any time you saved on commute is gone, right? So it's almost like, I look at our reports and our data to see what we're doing. People that are subordinate to another, manager do the same to look and, make sure they're on the right task. And if everything's happy, then we don't bother them. So we sort of manage by exception, right? Like if I look at a task and say, wait a minute, why is he working on that? Well, then I'll call him, Yeah. Because I've worked in a lot of shops, I think, before I started my company, working in IT departments that, they'd have these, daily status meetings and you'd probably kill 20 hours a week in meetings, just saying, what are we going to do? And so we kind of cut that all out. And then we do stuff like, if a developer needs my feedback or even a customer's feedback on something, instead of saying, let's have a meeting. No, we don't need to have a meeting. Record a video, put it in our video hosting in the cloud, send me a link to it, and I'll watch it at midnight.
Yeah.
And then I'll email, or I might take a video
I'll watch
of
it at 2 times speed.
exactly. Or I might make a video of me replying to his video, drawing on the screen of what I don't,
Yeah.
And so all that sort of like opening it up so that we're not like blockading ourselves by, our 1 p.m. standing meeting type stuff means things just kind of flow. The trick, I think, with that a little bit is priority of tasks, though, because when everything is sort of in flux and asynchronous, then, what should I be working on at any given time, right? And so, we've got some systems to sort of help manage the priority there so that people aren't sort of just getting into stuff that, is out of order, basically. So, I mean, I guess I have the philosophy that if you can't manage remotely, then maybe you can't remotely manage, right?
Yeah.
And I think the remote environment exposes a lot of weaknesses in process, and it's not just managing software developers. I mean, if you're a law firm right now and you have everybody working from home, you're learning very quickly. Like, wow, the old way we did it is really painful, and this stinks. We need better document management or something, right? And so I think that it's kind of helped us sort of perfect our team management.
Yeah. Do you think, and we're just for notes for the audience here, we're recording this kind of just after the mid of April here, given COVID-19 and everyone working from home, do you think that there's going to be companies that just continue working from home, or what do you think the impact is going to be on this period of time for a lot of companies that were forced into this, unwillingly? Yeah, it's an interesting question. A lot of people have asked me that, and I think I think absolutely some companies will stick with it because they will realize, like I remember a friend of mine worked for IBM in North Carolina, and they did some study at one point and they figured out that having, I can't remember the exact figures, but, having a remote workforce at IBM saved them an average of like, $8 an hour or something like that across every employee in the organization, right? So, if you look at that, you think, well, why am I paying rent? Especially if you're like downtown or something or downtown Los Angeles or something like, my goodness, the amount of money you could save. But it kind of depends on how well you're able to manage because of the tools you have in place. So I think to some degree, it depends on how long we're in this setup for. Yeah. Because, what I'm seeing is that clients are getting into it and realize like, wow, this doesn't work. We need to implement a system so that, for instance, one of our customers, they manage like customs documents from shippers coming out of the country, right? Yeah. And they're realizing like, we can't even get to these files when we're working from home. Yeah. So we need a system. Well, okay, so let's give them another month and they'll get that system in place. And so now they're on the other side of that. And it's like, well, maybe we could just stay this way. Yeah. So I do think that some companies will stick with it. I think that other companies, some companies that have been resistant to allowing people to work remotely because they always said, well, that'll never work. We don't think we can manage your productivity. We won't know what you're doing. I mean, if they see a productivity gain or a drop, then they're going to use it to justify the next decision, right? Yeah. If those employees are sitting home doing nothing, watching Netflix, they're going to say, we tried it, didn't work. Yeah. And that was terrible. We got nothing done. And I mean, obviously there's a cultural component to whether or not that's what your team is doing, right? Yeah, and I think that's true. I think some are going to come down to, the nature of the culture and how they respond. And I think there's going to be some that might actually dramatically shift the amount of work they do, with distributed teams, whether it's at home or just, from remote locations. Some will probably adopt some of the practices or at least develop a better contingency plan or be able to kind of go into this mode if need be much more easily in the future in terms of, having the infrastructure and the policies and the processes sort of set up to be able to handle this. And then some will just be, thank God we're back in the office. They won't change.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, before all this happened, of course, there was a lot of discussion and talk about medical leave policies and childcare, paternal and maternity leave and all this sort of stuff of becoming mandated or whatever and sort of stuff, right? And, it kind of makes you wonder like, well, so might more companies say, all right, guess what? You can get paid on medical leave. You can work from home. It's no problem. You still have to work. Yeah. You have to be able to work. Right?
Yeah, you have to.
As opposed to maybe a black and white thing of you're either in the office getting paid or you're at home being unpaid. Right?
Yeah. So that's interesting. Sam, this has been a pleasure. If people want to find out more about you, more about Unstoppable, what's the best way to get that information?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is unstoppablesoftware.com. That's certainly a central hub to check things out. You can check out our podcast on there. We have a lot of case studies and blog articles and such. If you want to reach out to me, my email is just sschutte, so SSCHUTTE @unstoppablesoftware.com.
Great. I'll make sure that the links and the URL and the email addresses in the show notes here so people can click through, get that information. Thank you so much for taking some time today. I'll always love talking to people in the tech space, talking about remote work, particularly in today's day and age. But I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to Scaling Up Services with business coach Bruce Eckfeldt. To find a full list of podcast episodes, download the tools and worksheets, and access other great content, visit the website at scalingupservices.com. And don't forget to sign up for the free newsletter at scalingupservices.com/newsletter.